Hi, I'm Josanne Wright Callender, the author of the Happy Little Garbage Truck Picture Book and Educational System. We've been talking about how we can instill hope in a child, and one of the best ways, and it also stated in social emotional learning, is through goal setting. And since these two types of thought processes dovetailed, C.R. Snyder's hope theory and my focus on social emotional learning, I said, well, the best way for me to explain how we can talk about goal setting with a child is through my own experiences of creating the happy little garbage truck. Now, this was a labor of love. And the other day I described what inspired this story, and it was through a young child who was 5 years old in my kindergarten who was really enamored with garbage trucks. So, setting the goal is step number 1. Step number 2 is planning the steps of how are you going to reach that goal. And this is probably going to be a two-parter because there are a lot of steps. First, writing the book, my mother came up with the idea for the story. And I said, "Well, what could she says, "Why don't you write the story?" And I says, "Well, Mom, what could a garbage truck do?" I was just baffled. And she says, "Well, he could be a little garbage truck in a little town." And when she said that, I said, "Oh my goodness, that's so true," because, I'm working with young children, and they really connect with these small characters. And as we started, it was so wonderful working with my mom. And of course, she's my co-writer on the cover because she was my inspiration also. But as we worked together, we came up with different scenarios and even came up with some ideas for other books in the series, which are yet to come. But we fleshed the story out together. As I started writing, I came up with some other ideas that would kind of dovetail into some of my educational ideas of what I wanted to do with the social emotional learning. So we wrote the story, and then came the part about getting an artist, and that was, I had to pause there because that was the part I thought would be very easy, but it became the most complicated part of developing this book, as often does. So when the thing that you think is going to be easy is usually the hardest thing, and the thing you think is going to be hardest turns out to be the easiest thing. But when you're helping children form goals and formulate and plan goals, it's important to know this because they're going to get distracted and disappointed and maybe derailed by those things that turn out to be a little bit harder. Well, like I said, this was my first time ever putting a book together. And to give you some ideas to when we started this idea, came up with the idea in 2004 or 5. And it was finding the artist. I had one person who I thought was going to be the artist, but the price was way too high when we got down to the actual creation of the character. So I talked with several other people, and it was through my layout artist and printer when I told him, I really need an artist. I'm ready to go on this story. What would you recommend? Do you have any ideas? Because Frank Espinoza and I had been talking from the very start. And he said, "Well, I have a friend who's a fabulous artist." And, I never thought of asking him from the very start. And he never thought of suggesting his friend from the start either because he thought I had artists. So I said, "Oh, sure." I said, "Who is your friend?" And he recommended Steve Rashad. So Steve and I bandied around some ideas for the garbage truck. How would it look? And I what I did was I printed out these are the only ones that I have, and I did it on spent paper. But what I did is I sent this packet, and you can see these little hash marks down here, to my niece who had 2 young children, and they're a little bit older now, and a couple of friends with young children, and I asked them, "Which garbage truck do you like?" And so I sent, like, a series of pictures, and they voted on them. So I had, like, what do they call it? Uh, consumer, uh, I guess, review of what would be engaging to my young audience. And so they gave me ideas as to how Steve should continue on with his illustration. And so that was the first part. Steve started working on an idea as to how the garbage truck would look. And while he was doing that, I started working on what each panel would look like. And it was so great. One of my friends, Ken Paris, who's an animator, was the one who suggested that I create um, a panel for what happens when on each page of the book. And so, I decided to do it sort of like a table, and said on page 1, these are the elements that I wanted to see, and this is the first sentence in the story, and the very first one. And so, I had time to look at this and think about it, and I didn't want it to be really long. I wanted it to be about 24, 28 pages. And Frank told me that should be even number of pages. So that helped me a lot. And I started creating these panels that I was going to turn over to Steve when he had his sketches completed. Now, the funny thing about all of this is I never met either man, but they both turned out to be just wonderful resources in helping me get things started. So next time we'll continue the planning, and thank you for subscribing and sharing, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.